recite that as well. Any surahs you want as much as you want.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد. أحسنت.
May Allah have mercy on the one who recites Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله نعم المولى ونعم الوكيل. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا أنيس نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من خير أعوانه وأنصاره. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا مهجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام. All praises are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lord of all the worlds, and we send our salams, salutations, and blessings on our noble Prophet, peace be upon him, and his pure household. We thank Allah once again for blessing us this opportunity to be in the majlis of Abu Abdullah and Husayn. It is clear for us as of now, and it is manifest for us in this fifth majlis that these majalis, these gatherings are an opportunity for us that not many have been blessed with. And so many riwayat, so many ahadith about these congregations and these gatherings have been mentioned. And we did mention in the first majlis as well that the one who cries, the one who laments, the one who makes others lament, the one who makes his face look like he's lamenting, the Jannah, the paradise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes obligatory on that person. Such a weighty this congregation and this gathering is. Alhamdulillah, such a gathering is a gathering that we cherish, and it's a gathering that alhamdulillah we look forward to for every time in our life. My brothers and sisters, bear in mind that these majalis that we have are not specific to only the 10 nights of Muharram. I'd like to emphasize from this point that in the Islamic culture, especially in the culture of those who follow the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the ones who die from our family members, their weeping, the loss and the grief that falls upon us is no more than the loss that befalls on us from the martyrdom of Abu Abdullah Husayn and his family. My brothers and sisters, it's our customary and it's our culture that when someone we lose, when we are afflicted with pain and grief, instead of crying of that pain, we hold a majlis for Abu Abdullah Husayn. Both we get the reward of the majlis, we also grieve for Abu Abdullah Husayn, which is somehow in line with the grief that we might have. That's why Imam Husayn Aabidi alayhi salam, when he describes his Shi'as, his followers, the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, he says, Shi'atuna yahzanu lihuznina wa yafrahu lifarahina. Our followers, the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, those who claim to be in line with the teachings of the noble Prophet and those after him, are those who become happy out of our happiness and who become sad out of our sadness. So my brothers and sisters, sometimes we might have a birthday party, we might have someone in our family who has been born. Yes, we become happy about that, but if that is a time of the grief of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, we forget that happiness and remember the grief of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And sometimes when we see someone being lost, but then at the same time we have the happiness of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, we become happy. When the noble Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, he once returned from one of the battles to Medina, he saw his cousin brother Ja'far, the brother of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And the battle that he was returning from was a battle that he became victorious and he returned. My brothers and sisters, the noble Prophet, he was so excited by both the victory in the battle and also the receiving of his cousin brother Ja'far, who was, as a matter of fact, in a mission by the noble Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family to Ethiopia, where he led the caravan of Muslims who were tortured in Mecca to be safeguarded under the kingdom of a Christian king in Ethiopia. When he returned, he got so happy about it. He was excited, and to express this, he said, I don't know how to be happy. I don't know which of this to celebrate. Should I celebrate the receiving of my brother Ja'far, my cousin brother Ja'far, or should I celebrate the victory of the battlefield? Battle of Khaybar. And Battle of Khaybar, as we know, is one of the most prominent and one of the most recognized battles in the history of Islam. So my brothers and sisters, the happiness that the Prophet faced, although Battle of Khaybar, as you know, took a few months, and this battle was a battle of the hardship, and we only see that small part at the end where Imam Ali alayhi salam made the Muslims victorious, but the entire process of this victory was such a difficult process, and it took a lot of time for the Muslims to achieve this victory, but the Prophet did not give much attention to all of this, but gave the attention to the happiness. So my brothers and sisters, our happiness should be in line with the happiness of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the noble Prophet. And our sadness should also be Likewise, in line with it. That's why when we say in our du'as, we say, Allahumma ja'al mahyana mahya Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Oh Allah, make our lives, make our living the living of the noble Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family. And oh Allah, wa mamatana mamata Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. And make our death, make our ending, the ending of the noble Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family. Such a dua, such a very rich dua we make in our prayers. The entire meaning of the dua is that we must follow the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Our emotions should be synchronized with the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. My brothers and sisters, in history, in events, in poems, in narratives, in stories, we hear of champions, we hear of romantic figures, we hear of so many things that have been passed and now being occurred. In the recent era of the movies that we see these days, Hollywood publicizing movies of heroes that never ever existed. I can remember when I first entered Islamic seminary at home, I was with the brothers from UK and the US, and we were in the dining hall having the lunch. And it was amusing for me to find that some of the brothers, although it was out of joke, they were discussing who was more powerful, Batman or Spider-Man. Or I don't know, Batman or Captain America or something like that. Now these heroes, these figures don't have a realistic manifestation in the reality. These are just movies with CGIs and those effects that they apply after the recording. And these figures have no benefit to us. These are essentially idols formed by the West and the Western entertainment industry, so that we see them as gods. And now in movies of these superheroes, it's very clear and recognizable that they even bring in the word God. They say, okay, these are the gods of that, these are the gods of that. These are essentially fantasies. These are created by the entertainment industry to keep the minds away from the real heroes, to keep the mind away from what had happened in reality in the histories. So that the imaginary mind of mankind continues to be occupied with such imaginary figures. My brothers and sisters, we do, however, have realistic champions and heroes around us. If you look at the recent football and the cricket, especially in the West Indies, we have in Guyana, Sarawak, we have Chandra Paul and these figures. These are considered champions. These are people that when the Guyanese culture or the West Indian culture or the Caribbean culture is being portrayed, their faces, their figures, their attention and their presence is usually recognized. Likewise, if you see in the Middle East, for example, in Iran, they cherish this champion by the name of Rustam, someone who fought for the Iranian nation. We also find champions of wars in different nations, my brothers and sisters. Wa alaikum assalam. Now these champions, normally what happens, wa alaikum assalam. These champions are usually in line or somewhat connected to a particular nation. You will never find a Guyanese cricketer representing, for example, Russia in any of the official symposiums. You will never find the Husayn Bolt representing any other country except Jamaica in the official visits or the official programs. However, we know of a champion and we know of a hero that is not connected to any specific or any particular nation, that is not connected to any particular people, not connected to any particular movement, but his own movement, his own ideology, and his name is Husayn. After so many years of his martyrdom, we are now seeing people. Husayn was Arab, but the most who revere him are non-Arab. Husayn was killed in Karbala. The entire world circulates. Many people give their lives in the way of reaching Karbala. And as we mentioned in the previous majalis and in previous incidents as well, like previous events as well, that of the camp, in the camp of Abu Abdullah Hussein, we had no age limit. We had people of old age and young age. We had people from different nations, creed, ideologies. We had Christians, Wahab ibn Amr Kalbi. He was one of the Christians who joined Abu Abdullah Hussein when he saw the light in the mission of Abu Abdullah. And so this movement of Abu Abdullah, my brothers and sisters, arises now a question in our mind, that we call for the weeping of Abu Abdullah Hussein. We call for the crying and lamenting for the atrocities befallen on Abu Abdullah Hussein and his family and companions. They were, of course, slaughtered and butchered and killed very brutally, in the worst of manners. And this is especially in considering who is being slaughtered. If someone was in a street fight, some crime scene happened, one killed the other, that's a different story. But then you're talking about a person who is the grandson of the noble prophet, where the noble prophet talks about this man. He says, Husaynun minni wa ana min Husayn. The first part is very comprehensive, it's very understandable. Husayn is from me, meaning that he's the grandson of the noble prophet. Why does the noble prophet have to say, wa ana min Husayn, that I am also from Husayn? It means something different. There's something, the different connection between this Husayn and the noble prophet, peace be upon him, and his family. And this personality of Husayn that we know, Sayyida Shababi Ahli Jannah, he is of the masters of the youth of paradise. My brothers and sisters, this is not easy, and this is not a light thing to say about someone. To someone guarantee Jannah is not an easy thing. Even some of the greatest of the ulamas, when they were asked, what do you want if you were given one wish, what would you ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And that wish is to be guaranteed its acceptance. The ulama would say, aqibatun bi khayr. My ending should be the best of ending. My ending should be in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the noble prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because the ending, we don't know how it ends up to be. We find that in the day of Ashura, some of the companions, before Ashura of course, those people who were with Husayn alayhi salam from Mecca going towards Kufa, one after the other, when they saw Husayn marching towards the death, they left Imam Husayn alayhi salam alone. On the day of Ashura, we find people like Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi joining Abu Abdullah Hussein just before his death, moments before his death. Who is the winner and who is the loser? Where Imam Husayn alayhi salam, he writes sometimes, he approaches people. One of the Sahabi of the Aimma, one of the Sahabi of Imam Ali alayhi salam, he went Imam Husayn, he hears that he's near, in the proximity of the caravan of Abu Abdullah Hussein. He goes and he pays him a visit. He says, do you want to join me in this mission? He invites him, gives him the opportunity, such an opportunity. May Allah never bring such a time for us where the Imam is asking for our allegiance and we say no. This man, he has the audacity and comes back and says, Hussein, the path that you are in is death, guaranteed. I will give you my horse, I will give you my sword, I will give you my money, but I have to return back to where I came from. Imam said, I don't need your sword, I don't need your money, I don't need your horse, I need you in this path. These people left Abu Abdullah Hussein. So my brothers and sisters, for a person to be guaranteed heaven, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. The noble prophet, you will find in the riwayat and hadith, very few people, very, very limited people guaranteed Jannah. At the lifetime of the noble prophet, peace be upon him and his family, you will find that there are Sahabi by the name of Talha and Zubayr, where they were praised during the lifetime of the noble prophet, peace be upon him and his family. Talha al-Khayr and Sayf al-Islam Zubayr, the sword of Islam, Zubayr. What else do you want? But then at the end, after the death of the noble prophet, they did not support the successor of the noble. They did, of course, stand up. They were not successful in supporting the Imam. At the end, what happens? Slowly, slowly, the world consumed them. The dunya consumed them. Look at the history and where they reached. Time came where Talha and Zubayr stood against Imam Ali in the Battle of Jamal. My brothers and sisters, it's not an easy thing. We read the history, and it is very easy for us to read what is written on the paper, but very hard to comprehend and see what's going on in reality, my brothers and sisters. When Zubayr was at the time of the noble Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, Zubayr would look at Ali and be very happy about him, would cherish his presence. The Prophet looked at Zubayr and said, Zubayr, do you like Ali? Zubayr says, of course, I love him more than myself. He says, Zubayr, will you be surprised if I tell you there will be one day that you will stand up against him and fight against him? He said, how come that day? It's impossible. So my brothers and sisters, I'm mentioning all of this to emphasize that a person to be guaranteed Jannah is not an easy thing. So Abu Abdullah Husayn, when he's named Sayyida Shabab al-Jannah, not that he's guaranteed Jannah, but he is the master of the youth of paradise. Such a personality being surrounded. فَاجْتَمِعُوا عَلَى الْحُسَيْنِ. It's not one person, not two person, more than 30,000 people surrounding this camp of Abu Abdullah Husayn, which is not a military camp, it was a civil camp. And in addition to that, whatever they had in their hands, stones, pebbles, spears, arrows, swords, they used against the family of Abu Abdullah Husayn. My brothers and sisters, this hero that we see now, this Husayn, that has broken all the barriers, all the nationalistic barriers, all the language barriers, all the human barriers that exist to penetrate in the hearts of those, of the truth seekers, of those who seek justice in this world. And this Husayn, this hero that we call now and we read for him, that when Imam Zaman, Imam Sahib al-Asri was Zaman, he arrives in the Kaaba, he uses his name to start his mission. And so much of request has been made from us, from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, to cry for him. Who is this man? What is so heroic of this man? My brothers and sisters, I did mention in my majlis yesterday that there are two sides to Karbala. There are two pages to the incident of Karbala. We have to analyze the personality of Abu Abdullah Husayn and the events that took place in Karbala to understand what is so heroic about them. Us weeping for Abu Abdullah Husayn as a hero, why should we cry? The Christians, they see Jesus as their hero, but they don't cry for him. They cherish him. They joyfully, on the day when he was crucified, they come out joyfully and they celebrate that day. And they consider that day the day of mercy, the day of forgiveness, where all the Christians are forgiven because of being connected to this man, Jesus ala nabiyina wa ala alihi wa alayhi salam. But why our Husayn, we call him hero, but we weep for him? Why is it our hero opposite than all the other heroes that are deemed victorious? My brothers and sisters, there are two pages to the event of Karbala. There is a dark page and there is a luminous and the light page. The dark page is when the family of Abu Abdullah Husayn himself and his companions were slaughtered and butchered on that day, on a day that is none like other day. My brothers and sisters, where in history, where in the crimes do you find that after the killing of a person, they order the horses, the horsemen, to change and to mount new horseshoes? Those who know this, they know that the horseshoes are made of metal. And when you mount the new horseshoes on the hooves of the horse is not comfortable because he is not acquainted, he is not very well accustomed to that new shoes. He keeps smashing on the ground with the shoes, the new shoes that the horse is now mounted with, the hooves that are now possessing the new shoes. On that day, they changed the hooves of the horseshoes of the hooves of the horses, just so that the horses are ready for the trampling of who? The dead body of Abu Abdullah Husayn. Do you find any more darkness than this? The historians write in the history books about how many wounds Abu Abdullah Husayn had. Some say 300, some say 700, some say 70. There are different numbers on this. Whatever it is, when Lady Zainab reaches the dead body of Abu Abdullah Husayn, the body without any head, she could not recognize the body. My brothers and sisters, what does this mean? The body was so much in wound, so much cut into pieces, that the persons could not recognize which one was the body of Abu Abdullah Husayn. It was filled with blood. Any more darkness than this? Like I mentioned, keep in mind that this person is not an ordinary person. It's not a person who is involved in a gang fight. It's not a person who is involved in a street fight. He is the grandson of the noble Prophet, peace be upon him, promised Jannah, killed by whom? The Muslims, or the people who claim to be Muslims. So my brothers and sisters, the dark side of the history is what we weep and we lament and we cry about. And it is unjust that we just we just consider this dark side of the history and we forget about the other side. It is unjust to Abu Abdullah. We will become one of the oppressors to Abu Abdullah Husayn if we just look at this part of the history and we cry and we lament. There will be no difference amongst us and the Christians if we just consider the martyrdom and the way the Abu Abdullah Husayn and his family members and his companions were martyred. Yes, crying for Abu Abdullah Husayn will carry us to Jannah, but just crying? What is this meaning of weep that the ayah is asking for us? That as a result of that crying and weeping, Jannah becomes obligatory for us. It is unjust of us and it is oppressive of us to Abu Abdullah Husayn if we consider just the weeping part. Sometimes when you look at the poems written for Abu Abdullah Husayn, you'll be surprised. It's as if the stars and the moons have come together to kill Abu Abdullah Husayn. What happened on the day of Karbala, on the day of Ashura? Who was the killer of Husayn? And why is weeping so important for Husayn? And this brutal killing I mentioned in the previous majlis, we saw brutality worse than this in the recent history. Just look at Daesh himself. Just the small terrorist group who are Khawarij, who are the people that the Prophet Ali prophesies that such a group will arise once again in the end of times. And you know at the time of Imam Ali they had Imam Ali was faced with three major battles. One was Battle of Jamal, one was Battle of Siffin and Nahrawan. The last battle that Imam Ali was faced with during his government was against the Khawarij, and these people are exactly the descendants or the predecessors of Daesh, my brothers and sisters. These Khawarij, they went to the extreme, to so much extreme that when they saw a dumb woman, a pregnant dumb woman who cannot speak, and her husband traveling across their camp, they captured them and they interrogated them to find out where he's coming from, what he's doing, and who he is aligned with. When they realized that this man was one of the servants in the army of, not one of the soldiers, servants in the army of Ali who used to make the dough for the army, do you know what they did? They cut the belly of the mother, removed the baby, killed the baby, and also killed the father. Does that ring a bell? The Daesh of today. These are the Khawarijis. What crime have you not seen from the Daesh of today? And the day of Ashura, my brothers and sisters, yes, they burnt the tents, but they did not intend to burn the people. The family of Abu Abdullah Husayn, yes, they were faced with fire, but they were not burnt. But you see, Daesh, they put the people in cages and they burnt them. Atrocities sometimes unbearable to the human eye have been committed after the tragedy of Karbala and the incident of Ashura. It is unjust for us to only consider the weeping part, because if it is only for weeping, then there are so many weeping that we have to do across the history, my brothers and sisters. If we have to lament for the crimes that were done against humanity, forget about Islam, against humanity by the Crusaders and many others who claim to be the men of God, then weeping is our full-time job. Lamentation will be our full-time job. But what it is that in the movement of Abu Abdullah Husayn, we say, no, it's not just weeping, and this weeping is not any other, is of any other weeping. It's a different form of weeping. We come to the white page, the luminous page from the history of Abu Abdullah, from the history of Karbala. In the dark page, Yazid and his companions were victorious. They were the champions. They were the one who won. Like I mentioned, when I say so many wounds were in the body of Abu Abdullah Husayn, someone asks, how come that they had the time to count the wounds of the body of Abu Abdullah, count the arrows and the swords and the spears that the body of Abu Abdullah in the day of Ashura endured? The answer is Yazid himself sent historians to capture and record what was going on in the day of Ashura and the plains of Karbala, to find out how brutally Husayn was killed and his companions. So that when the time arrives, when the opportunity arrives, he will take dignity and honor and say, I killed Husayn in this way. My army was able to enter so much of wounds in the body of Abu Abdullah Husayn. This was his plan. So if we look at the dark side of history, my brothers and sisters, the dark page of Karbala, it will be only weeping and crying. The champions of this will be Yazid, Shimr, and Umar on the side, and all those who killed the family of Abdullah Husayn and mutilated their honor and dignity. But when we turn the page, we see the light, the luminous part of Karbala. And this part is where the victorious persons are the Husayn and the family of Husayn. The champion and the hero of this part of Karbala is Husayn. Which part it is that I'm referring to? It's the part that talks about the bravery, that talks about the resistance and the resilience and the patience of Abu Abdullah Husayn and his companions and his family members on the day of Ashura in the desert of Karbala. My brothers and sisters, it is this luminous part that the lady Zainab, when she enters into the palace of Yazid and she sees how Yazid treats them and how happy he is. I mentioned in the last majlis as well, she mentions Kid kaidak wasa'a sa'yak. Plan your plot, execute and strive in the path of executing your plot. وَنَاصِرْ جَهْدَكَ, and put all your struggle and all your efforts as much as you want. فَوَاللَّهِ, and by God, لَا تَمْحُوا ذِكْرَنَا وَلَا تَمُوتَ وَحْيَنَا. You will never be able to annihilate and perish our remembrance, and you will never be able to kill the wahi, the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why, because of this luminous page of Karbala, when Lady Zainab salamullahi alayha, she was called in the palace of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa, and Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad wanted to slander Lady Zainab. She says, look what God did to you. Lady Zainab responded, Wallahi, fa wallahi, I did not see anything but beauty. Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I haven't seen anything but beauty. What is beauty in seeing your brothers killed in the day of Ashura in that way? What is beauty of seeing your sons? Lady Zainab, she had 2 of her sons slaughtered in front of her. What is beauty in that? As if we see only the dark page of Ashura, the dark page of Karbala. Why should you cry and also say, La ma ra'aytu illa jamila? Because there is a light page of it. There is another page. There is a luminous page. And that's why, my brothers and sisters, when we remember the atrocities of Karbala and we cry for them, We're not just crying and weeping for something that happened 1,400 years ago. We are preparing ourselves for something that is about to happen. If we claim that Islam is hayy, Islam is for everyone, and Islam is for all the times, then of course the crying for Abu Abdullah Husayn should not only be confined for the history and for the atrocities that were befallen on the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam in the day of Ashura, on the desert of Karbala, but rather it should encompass all the times and all the eras. That's why I say it is unjust of us and oppressive of us, and it's our oppression to Abu Abdullah Husayn if we consider only the dark side of the history and we weep for Abu Abdullah, forgetting the purpose and the objective of this weeping, which is to incite and to relive the bravery of Abu Abdullah Husayn within us. I did mention in the first majlis, there was not a single person on this earth, not a single prophet who achieved a position near Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except by crying for Abu Abdullah Husayn, except by weeping. Now what is this? So much of atrocities in other times and to other people. Why Abu Abdullah? Because this is not any other atrocities. This weeping is not any other weeping, and this lamentation is not any other lamentation. It is this luminous side of Karbala where the Abbasi Khalifa, those who came after Abu Abdullah Husayn after the tragedy of Karbala, those who came by the name, by the slogan of taking revenge for Abu Abdullah Husayn, and they took the government, but they eventually took a complete turn, 180-degree turn against Abu Abdullah Husayn. It is because of this luminous page where they would annihilate the grave of Abu Abdullah. What does the grave of Abu Abdullah has to do? Now tell me, my brothers and sisters, if someone was to go and annihilate the grave of someone in this, in the closest graveyard around us, would there be any resistance? What would be the purpose of annihilating the grave of someone? What does this grave have for us? What is so important for us in this grave and this shrine? And this Khalifa, the Mu'tasim and the other Abbasi Khalifa had to order the destruction of the grave. And not only that, whoever visits the grave, whoever travels towards Karbala, they would be beheaded. My brothers and sisters, history was not very in favor of us. One of the slaves, one of the female slaves of the Abbas Khalifa, Mutawakkil, when he found out that this female slave is not around his palace for a while, he asks about her. The people said she is traveling. When she comes back, the Khalifa asks her, "Where were you?" She said, "I went to ziyarah." Now ziyarah, in its more abstract terminology, it's any form of pilgrimage. It can be ziyarah of the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Hajj and Umrah. When the Khalifa was astonished, he asked her, "This is not the time for Umrah or Hajj. Which ziyarah did you go to?" After insisting, he was able to find out that she went to the ziyarah of Husayn, Abu Abdullah Husayn. He became outrageous. Why, man? Let her visit the grave of Abu Abdullah. What's the problem in visiting the grave? For this, he killed this slave. My brothers and sisters, in the history, we've seen so many times, not the shrine, but the grave of Abu Abdullah Husayn, let alone the shrine, was completely set to grounds. They poured water. It's mentioned in the history that they poured water to level the ground and make sure that there is no traces of that grave. They even distorted the ways towards Karbala, the roadways that lead towards Karbala, they distorted them. Why is it still that we remember this Husayn? What is so different of this grave and of this way to Karbala that the governors and the tyrannies of the time were so afraid of? It's because of this luminous side, my brothers and sisters. Because this weeping is no ordinary weeping. It incites bravery in us. It motivates us. It brings us out from the cocoon that we're living in. That's why in Guyana we had the festival called Husayn Festival. Taja Festival, I'm sorry. In Trinidad we still have this Husayn Festival. What is it in this? That in Taja Festival they had to force the shutdown of this Taja Festival. What was it in this festival? On the 10th of Muharram. If you look at some of the photos and some of the historic events, you'll find that they were just simple people coming out on the streets and beating their chests and weeping. But what is it that they had to stop them? Because we don't see the luminous side of the history, the lightful side of the history. And it's that this weeping incites revolution. This weeping for Abu Abdullah Husayn brings out a man from his cocoon that he's living and shows him the clarity of what's going on outside the world. That's why Imam Khomeini alayhi rahmah, he says, everything that we have in this revolution, in the Islamic Republic of Iran, is because of this Muharram and Safar. Crying, weeping, is this what gave birth to revolution? No, my brothers and sisters, when we cry and we weep, we're not just crying and weeping for the atrocities befallen in the past. We are reliving and we are motivating ourselves internally to prepare for ourselves, preparing ourselves to fight against injustice in all levels. That's why Shaheed Mutahari, when he talks about Palestine, he says, Wallahi, if Imam Husayn was alive today, then his main goal would be Palestine. He would fight for Palestine and die in Palestine. The Yazid of our time, we need to understand and be like the Husayn of our time, and the Ashab of Husayn of our time, and the family of Husayn of our time. My brothers and sisters, there is no easy weeping that we go through. Like I mentioned, history was not in our favor. On the day of Ashura, when the horn and the sound of war was sound, there was turmoil. The night before Ashura, it is mentioned that even from the army of Yazid, even from the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, there were people who had visited or who would have felt the presence of the noble Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family during his lifetime. And they were the shuyukh of the Kufa. It is written in history that in that night they would make dua, they would say, Oh Allah, Nasr Husayn. Ya Allah, Wansur Husayn. They would make dua and say, Oh Allah, help Husayn. What is it that they're asking from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Well, they were against Husayn alayhi salam. They were thinking that Husayn will tomorrow give the hand of allegiance to Yazid. They were asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give revelation to Husayn, to guide Husayn towards giving the hand of allegiance to Yazid. Basira, my brothers and sisters, insight is very important. My brothers and sisters, it is important that we make timely decisions, correct decisions at the right time. When the history passes and it's right and the records of the history are being revisited, it's easy to say, okay, this was the right path and that was the wrong path. But now, living in this time right now, having the unknowns and the knowns next to each other, limitations and the others next to each other, making a decision in that moment, when the line between haqq and batil is blurred, that's something that is important that we ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with. Hawr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, the man who stopped Abu Abdullah al-Husayn from entering Kufa. I did mention in the previous majlis, a very concise history of how Abu Abdullah Husayn led his caravan from Mecca to Kufa. There were so many manzil that he stopped. There were so many, checkpoints that he had to stop. And if you look at the history, there are so many things, beautiful and precious things about Abdullah Husayn mentioned in these manzils. And for all of you, my brothers and sisters, to read the history. When he arrives at a manzil, at a specific point, Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, they collide with the caravan of Abu Abdullah Husayn. He holds the horse of Abu Abdullah and says, Husayn, either you pay the allegiance, hand of allegiance to Yazid, or you will no longer continue your path towards Kufa. I am tasked by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. I am one of the persons hired by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad to stop you from entering Kufa. But Hurr, my brothers and sisters, was a clean man from heart, though he was like a gem dirtied by pollution, and he was like a diamond dirtied by pollution and dirtiness. That pollution and dirtiness had to be cleaned off by Abu Abdullah Husayn so that gem shines out, that diamond shines out of him. Imam Husayn alayhi salam, when he sees Hurr in this state, he says, Sakilatka ummuk. May Allah cry, may Allah make your mother weep on your death. Imam Husayn alayhi salam made a dua for his death because of the greatness of the act that Hurr did. Because of the mightiness. It's not an ordinary task to stop Husayn from continuing his journey. But my brothers and sisters, a time came when Umar ibn Sa'd took over the group that Hurr was leading with his great army. Hurr was now one of the soldiers of Umar ibn Sa'd. On the night of Ashura, he sees that on one side, the army of Yazid is now counting and they're calculating as to how much booty they will be dividing between each other. How they have promised their families to carry some things from the booty of the war for them. One says, I saw an earring from a child. The other says, I saw this. The other says, I saw that jewelry. I said, they're now calculating and dividing amongst each other. I will take that and you take this. And the other side, he sees like the honeybees buzzing, praying for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing ibadah, munajat in the night, the darkness of the night, preparing for their death. It's as if they're giving water for their own sacrifice. You know how we slaughter the animal? We first give the water to the animal and then we slaughter the animal. It's as if they're feeding themselves, they're quenching their thirst with the spiritual water and preparing themselves for tomorrow. Ismail's one after the other preparing for their own sacrifices. The day of Ashura arrives. Hurr sees that this is a time he needs to make a decision. Either he kills Abu Abdullah and his companions and his family members, and he's deemed and damned until the day of judgment, becomes the enemy of Islam, or he joins the camp of Abu Abdullah. Perhaps he may be saved and find salvation. He makes a decision and he decides to rush, firru ila al-Husayn, rush towards Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. He and two of his companions, apparently, one of them was his son. They flee away from the army of Umar ibn Sa'd and they arrive to the camp of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. How should Hurr approach Abu Abdullah? After what he had did, he was the inception of this tragedy, inception of the atrocities that will eventually befall on the companions and the family of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. How should he approach Abu Abdullah? It is mentioned that he blindfolded himself. He had sword in his hand and the Quran in his other hand. He approaches the tent of Imam al-Rahmah. He says, "Oh Husayn, I was was the one who stopped you from entering into Kufa. I was the cause of the atrocities that will now befall you. Either take this sword and end my life right here and take the revenge, or by the Quran, forgive me and accept me as one of your soldiers. Husayn ibn al-Husayn Misbah al-Huda wa Safiratul Najah. What is Husayn going to do here? Husayn is the boat and the ship of salvation. Do you think Husayn is going to take the sword? He drops the sword and he holds the Quran and says, Hur, verily you are Hur, you're free. Hur in the Arabic language, it means free. You're free from all in this world, Hur. Brothers and sisters, this is only one companion of Abu Abdullah Husayn. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us like the Hur, wherever we have lost our path, to deviate our path back towards the path of justice, and to save us and to bring us salvation in the path of Abdullah Husayn. This is only one companion. You'll find all the companions of Abdullah Husayn braver one after the other. John, the African slave that was freed by Abu Dhar, now in the camp of Abdullah Husayn. He seeks forgiveness from Abu Abdullah, he fights for Abu Abdullah. These are the companions, Ashab of Husayn. Sa'id, I did mention his lamentation yesterday. When he stood up in front of Abu Abdullah Husayn while he was praying, being a shield for Abu Abdullah, his body being the shield for Abu Abdullah Husayn on the day of Ashura while he was praying, he will not allow a single arrow entering into Abu Abdullah Husayn. And when he falls, he asks a simple question, أَوَفَيْتُ يَبْنَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ? Have I fulfilled my responsibility? O the son of the noble Prophet, peace be upon him, responded, my brothers and sisters, La yawm ka yawmaka ya Abu Abdullah. There is no day like your day, O Abu Abdullah. I must add one more thing to this sentence. There is no body like your body, O Abu Abdullah. There is no person like yourself, O Abu Abdullah Husayn. On the day of Ashura, and the plains of Karbala, in the desert of Karbala, when all were gone, his companions, Habib, Muslim, Joan, Sa'id, all were now perished. All of his friends, all of his companions, those small children of his are now gone. Abdullah ibn Hassan, now gone. Ali Asghar, now gone. His elder son, Ali Akbar, now gone. Everyone has now gone. He calls out, Hal min nasirin yansuruni. Is there any helper to help me? What was the reply to Abu Abdullah Husayn? An arrow comes from the camp, from the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, penetrating the heart of Abu Abdullah. In that situation, Abu Abdullah heads out to fight, my brothers and sisters. They have now encircled him. He has no way to go. Between him and death, there was no distance. And he asked one of the members, he gave an open request. He says, is there anyone to give me some water? There is narration that mentions that one person gives him some water. By the time he goes to drink that water. Rather, there are other narrations as well. I'm going to take this one narration. When he goes to drink the water, another pelts a stone to his forehead, and the blood from the forehead falls on his beard, and the blood falls into the water, and he is unable to drink that water. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم الحسين يا حسين
يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
In the previous nights, my brothers and sisters, we will try to lament and recite the poetry that we're familiar with, inshallah. And we'll beat our chest for Abu Abdullah Husayn, remembering the atrocities and paying the homage. ثار الله ثار الله ثار الله Husayn is the rising sword of God. ثار الله ثار الله Husayn is the rising sword of God. ثار الله ثار الله Husayn is the rising sword of God. ثار الله ثار الله Husayn is the rising sword of God. ثار الله ثار الله Husayn is the rising sword of God. ثار الله ثار الله Husayn is the rising sword of God. Karbala is on our mind. Let us see what we can find from the lives of Husayn's men who wrote the truth with a bloody pen. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. Tar Allah, invest in your voices, brothers and sisters. Tar Allah. Husayn is the rising sword of God. In our heart there lies a scar carved in by Ali Akbar. Young indeed, but there was the need for the wrath of a lion's heart. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. All of the free was able to see the clarity of the Imam's plea. He switched his side and changed the tide and rushed to his death with battle pride. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. There's Habib wishing to be the first cut down by the enemy. His loyalty was completely for the son of Imam Ali. And there's Sa'id ready to bleed for the sake of Muhammad's creed. In Salah the arrows he'd shield till his fate was finally sealed. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. Tar Allah, Husayn is the rising sword of God. Every day is Ashura, and every land is Karbala. Every day is Ashura, every land is Karbala. Every day is Ashura, and every land is Karbala. Every day is Ashura. Loudest of your voices. Every land is Karbala. Oh Mahdi, come to our aid. Oh Mahdi, answer our calls. All those Muslims who are suffering today, it's because we have lost our way. All the orphans and the sick and the needy are being oppressed at the hands of the greedy. All the tyrants have joined together to destroy Islam forever. As they had gathered around Karbala, it brings to light the day of Ashura. Oh Mahdi, come to our aid. Oh Mahdi, answer our calls. Every day is Ashura, everyone.
And every land is Karbala.
Every day is Ashura,
and every land is Karbala.
Every day is Ashura, and every land is Karbala. Oh Mahdi, come to our aid. Oh Mahdi, answer our call. Husayn ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. Husayn ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. Husayn, oh Master, oh Master, oh Master. Husayn, oh Master, oh Master, oh Master. Husayn, ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. Husayn, ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. Husayn, ya Mawla,
Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla,
Husayn, ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. Thirsty Ruqayya, thirsty Ruqayya, thirsty Abdullah, thirsty Abdullah. We just need water, Father, some water. Where's your flag bearer? Where's your flag bearer? Son of Fatima, son of Fatima. Husayn ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. Husayn ya Mawla,
Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla,
Husayn ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. Husayn ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. Zainab cries Allah, Zainab cries Allah. Where's Abu Abdullah? Where's Abu Abdullah? Where's Ali Akbar? Where's Abdullah? Where's my flag bearer? Where's my protector? Where is my Abbas? Where is my Abbas? Now the tent's on fire, shackled Ruqayya. Zainab, have you seen Zayn al-Abidi in unlocked in chains, in unlocked in chains? Zahra cries in pain, my Husayn is slain. Where is my Husayn? Husayn ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. 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 Zahra cries Husayn, Zahra cries Husayn. Zainab cries Husayn, Zainab cries Husayn, Zainab cries Husayn. My tears cry Husayn, my heart cries Husayn. Husayn cries out loud, where is my Abbas? Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. Husayn ya Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. 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 Husayn, 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 Husayn. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, sallallahu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك وعلى جدك وأبيك، السلام عليك وعلى أمك وأخيك، السلام عليك وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك وبنيك، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبا الفضل عباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا جميع شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن الأمان الأمان من فتن الزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.